into it. So, welcome
Okay.
to another episode of the Sister Girls Book Club podcast. I'm your host, Sharee. And on this episode, we have a self healing educator, wellness advocate, motivational speaker, and author, Yasmine Cheyenne, with us today. We are talking about her new book, Wisdom of the Path, the beautiful and bumpy ride to healing and trusting our inner God. I got the book. Welcome,
Woo
Cheyenne.
woo.
Yasmine, I'm about to call you your last name. How are you
It's
doing?
okay. Good. How are you?
I'm good. So I always ask this question on a scale of one to your favorite song this summer. How do you feel?
Oh, my favorite song this summer. Well, it would probably be Heated, Beyonce.
Oh, that's vacation vibes.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that's a good one. That's a good one. So you feel good. You
Yeah.
feeling pretty good. I like that
I
one.
feel good.
All
It's like
right. So
be outside weather. Yes.
yes, I like that. That I wasn't expecting that, but I'm
What were
happy. I'm
you
happy you said
expecting?
that.
Like something like,
I don't
you
know
know,
because
I'm
I
like,
always
no,
tell
let's
people I always feel like I am the person who knew the hits on the album, for instance, and I'm always like,
mm-hmm.
Heated was like a gem that people just overlooked
It's a
the first time.
gem.
That was a instant hit when I heard. I was like, oh, that's the song. So when you said Heat, I
Yes.
was like, yeah, we here.
We're here.
Okay, so I'm gonna jump right into your book. When I read this book, I honestly was like, this might be another self-help book. It's very like calm
Mhm.
on the cover, it's beautiful. Um, and I'm just like, I don't think this is self-help per se. I think this is like one of those books where it's a self-reflection book. And so
Mhm.
that's my question. Did you mean it to be that way? And what was your own thoughts and process behind saying I want to create a book that's now going to help people not only help themselves but kind of go inward? Because I think a lot of times when we're trying to seek out help, we buy the books, we start the course, we seek a lot of outside help. But when I read this book, a lot of the work was asking us to look within, and I was like, this is different.
Mhm. Yeah, you know what's so funny? When I started writing Wisdom of the Path, I knew that I wanted it to be something that allowed you to go within yourself because we just read so many self-help books. I think people are actually getting tired of self-help books that give us steps, and I think the reason why is because when we follow the steps and we don't see the change and we don't see the transformation, we're like, did I do it wrong? And if you're anything like me, you're harder on yourself. So with Wisdom of the Path being an introduction to the idea that we're going to be healing for life, we're going to be going down different journeys for life, I thought, how could I invite people to be reflective, be compassionate, give grace without judging every misstep or wrong decision or thing that doesn't work out? And I knew the only way I could do that was to do my own story in a reflective way that hopefully invites people into their stories in the same kind of way.
I like that because as I was reading the first time started reading the first chapter, I was like, oh, it's not different when you start to use your own stories, but you use like a lot of personal stories. And so when
Mm-hmm.
thinking about the layout of the book, how did you come up with the order? Because once you read one chapter, you realize it is order. You give like a personal story, and you come
Mm-hmm.
up with base camp, and then you have like intent, which has like
Mm-hmm.
some questions, and you have
Mm-hmm.
the walk the talk, and then in each chapter with your lessons learned. So how did you
Mm-hmm.
come to the idea to break it down like that? One, it made it easy to follow. That's number one, and two, I had a flow to it. So even if I didn't read it in the order of the exact chapters, I knew, all right, this is what we're going to get when I go through each chapter.
Yeah, so I thought about it like if I was going on a mission, if I was going somewhere, if I was planning something, what would be the steps that I wanted to take to be self-reflective and figure out where do I want to land when I get there? And so I started to think about, okay, in hindsight, which is always clearer, what do I wish I knew when I was going through this? What do I wish, what questions do I wish I had? What people do I wish I could have leaned on in those moments? And the reason why the stories are so personal is because I could not just give y'all the good. I have lots of good stories. Like if you read Wisdom of the Path, you might think, "Oh my God, like, girl, you've been through it."
Mhm,
But we all have. And so if I give you
mhm.
the good stories, then it's like, oh, okay, everything's gonna be fine. There are great stories in this book, but there are a lot of hard stories, and I find that those are the stories that I usually use as evidence that I am broken, or I don't deserve what I have, or that I used to compare myself to other people or judge myself. And so when we lay it bare, and granted, we won't always have relationships or connections with people where we get to have that type of in-depth of a conversation. But in the book, when I laid those particular stories bare, I knew those were stories that, one, a lot of people could relate to. A lot of folks been single moms or been raised by a single mom or are connected in some way to, motherhood or parenthood in a way that is different than what they expected. And growing up in, Brooklyn and the projects, and, dealing with a lot of the things that I dealt with, those aren't things that make me any less than anyone else, but society will make me think that something is wrong with me because of those things. And so talking about those, even if you're not from, the Brooklyn, or you never went through things like I did, whatever it is in your life that you're using as evidence that you don't have what it takes, I knew that it was important to point attention to that, because a lot of times we put people on pedestals. Oh, Yasmin must have it all figured out. No, I definitely don't. And these are the hard things that I've been through, and this is how I'm still learning to love myself too.
I love that because when I was reading, I was like, when I got to, even when you got to the last part, every chapter has the lessons learned. It's kind of like you
Hmm.
wrapping up what you learned, but you never made it seem like, and we all live happily ever after. You kind of let us know that, yo, I'm still going through things too. Or I'm still using the tools in my own toolbox, or the resources. I'm still working through things myself. And I think that's what I think to me separates this book from a lot of books that are put out there in the genre of like self-help. Um, it doesn't feel like you have it all together and now you're packaging it up and putting it in a book. It's just you sharing what you know and sharing like your
Hmm.
experience and inviting people to kind of like self-reflect. So I appreciated that. Um, but the first part of the book, I was like, "Oh, was she in my business? Like, how does she know? Like, was she in my conversations? Did she creep on my phone?" You said we need honesty to get to the next level, which is intent. And I think a lot of people, myself included, can miss out on the intent level because we aren't honest with ourselves about whatever the situation is. So how does that show up? I think people sometimes can't even recognize it. So that's why I'm asking the question. How does that show up? And how can we identify it sooner so that we can become more intentional quicker?
Oh, I love this. I think the easiest way to learn how to be honest with yourself is to first identify when you are lying to yourself. We have to start with the lies, because I don't know. I mean, we tell a lot of lies to ourselves. Even when you hear it come out of your mouth to somebody else, it's probably better. How's everything going with, your partner? How's everything going with your job? Oh, everything's great. I'm doing. When you start to hear the lie come out, that comes from self awareness. And I just want to be clear that that level of self awareness doesn't always happen in the moment. I'm not asking you to be like hypersensitive to every single thing you say, but this is why journaling is so powerful. Often when I find myself in a repetitive bad mood, or just I feel a negativity in my spirit, in my energy, I start going to daily journaling. When you journal daily, it's hard to lie. You could lie when you journal every now and then and be like, "Oh, everything was great. I just, had to yeah." But every day, as at some point you're going to write down a truth. And then we begin to explore it. And I think that that is, I mean, I just gave two different tips. The first one is like, I want to be clear. The first one is, if you're not into journaling for some reason, or you feel like you don't have the time, think about when the lies start to come out your mouth, right? You can hear yourself lying to other people. You can hear yourself lying to yourself. You can hear yourself suppressing your truth, your intuition. You can feel it. But if you feel called, or if you feel like you can commit to a daily journaling, and it doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm going to journal for 5 pages, like just give yourself 5 minutes. It could even be on the train, notes section of your phone, writing out. You're going to tell a truth at some point. It may take 5 days, but at some point you're going to find yourself writing down that discomfort. This relationship isn't actually working. We've really never been friends. I'm struggling financially and I'm not doing anything to help. Like, whatever your truth is, that is the launching point. We lie to ourselves because we're afraid to admit the truth and we think it might break us. But actually, that is the power position. When we admit where we are, where we're struggling, where things are hard, then we can begin to make those changes. Then we can begin to put into place a plan of action. Until we do that reckoning, that self reckoning with ourselves, we will stay in a fairy tale that we have constructed to protect ourselves, that is actually just a cycle of self betrayal.
It is, and that's why I said, "Oh, she was trying to pull edges in that chapter." 'Cause I was like, it was out the gate. You came in hot because I thought about it, and then I thought about your story about your financial woes because you kind of built off of that, and you were able to ask for help, and then help came. So Black women specifically, we rarely ask for help, and sometimes we even feel like, "Oh, we're stronger." I feel like now with Gen Z and millennials, we're like in a space where it's like, no, girl, it's hard, but some of
Mhm.
us still hold on to that. So, how can we reimagine what we believe about ourselves when we ask for help? Because I think that's another reason why we don't ask for help. We sometimes have this idea of like, they're going to think bad about me. They're going to think that I'm not, strong enough. I'm supposed to be able to do this, or we compare ourselves. So if our friends are doing well, and it's just like I'm struggling in this area, or I need money, or I need some form of help, we don't feel like we can ask because we're supposed to be all things at all times. So how can we reimagine that part so we can even ask for help?
Yeah, I talk about this in chapter 1. I'm not the type of person that likes to ask for help, and I didn't like asking for help. I was like, I do not want anyone to know that I'm struggling, anyone to know that I have quote unquote failed. And that kept me in it kept me in suffering for a long time. It wasn't until I asked for help that I realized not only am I not alone in this, because I learned from other people, oh, I've been there. Like, let me know what you need. But also, people started to check on me. And I think sometimes we have this story in our heads. Nobody cares about what I have going on. Nobody cares about what I'm struggling with. People don't even know you're struggling. You think that people know you're struggling, and nobody even knows. The other part of it is sometimes when you ask people for help, you find out that they're not interested in showing up for you in that way. And I think that's a really hard thing that a lot of people don't want to invite in. Like, I don't even want to ask anybody for help and give myself the opportunity to be disappointed by somebody not showing up for me. But it also allows us, that's another truth. Like, if I ask you for support and you can't show up, it doesn't mean necessarily you're not my friend, but perhaps you don't have the capacity to show up for me in the way that I need to. It doesn't mean that. What it allows me to do is turn my attention to someone else in my community and ask them for support. Like, we sometimes focus on the negative. Oh, that person couldn't show up for me after everything I did for them. I helped them plan their baby shower. I was their maid of honor. Like, we go there, do all of these things. Maybe they just can't be there for you in the same ways that you can be there for them. And maybe they aren't your friend. That's something that we might have to consider as well. But the focus is, where in my community can I find the support? Who are the people who are showing up? How can I continuously allow that reciprocity in? How can I allow that support in? How can I continue to create and build additional people in my community who can be there for me? Because that's where we get through. And especially when you're going through financial stuff or grief or any of the other topics that I mentioned in my book that really come and knock you off, they come and change you. They transform you when we go through these hard things. It's a powerful way of healing by allowing people around you, their reflection, to remind you of who you are when you forget.
I love that because I feel like a lot of times we isolate, we do the exact opposite.
Mhm.
We go into like hiding and we don't even give people the opportunity to help us. Like you said, people don't even know that we need help. And I think we limit ourselves to the idea of what even help could look like. Because sometimes it might not.
Mhm.
It could just be a conversation that'll help you feel lighter. But you did talk about grief, and that was like in the book. I pinned it. It's like certain tabs, and blue was like all the sad parts, and grief was just like I was like,
How
Lord,
many blue tabs do you
I, I don't got that many blue.
Okay,
The
okay.
blue ones was about like all the like moments. The white ones were just like, oh, I gotta ask about that. um, so I didn't have that many blue tabs,
Okay, good.
but grief is just so heavy. It's one of those things where it's just like, dang. And you said something in the book that I'm going to quote you, and you said grief doesn't strip us of our power; it takes away our armor, and that hit me. That hit home for me specifically because I was thinking about the passing of my grandmother. She passed in 2019, and I
Mhm.
can say I agree with that because that's how I felt. But then you went on to say it became your new mission to stay grounded to earth beneath you, without the person you would believe you who you believe was a force of gravity itself. So when writing this chapter and others, you spoke about your grandmother a lot. So how were you
Mhm.
able to surrender to the process of grief without abandoning the light? And how can others do the same when they're in grief? Like we can talk about it when we're out of it. When we're like knee deep, it's hard to kind of be like, yeah, I'm going to see the light. I'm going to choose joy. So
That is a fact. Um, so I think that grief is also like, I don't know if you have any kids. Do you have kids?
no.
Okay.
No
Okay.
kids.
I was like, okay. Um, but they have a saying that says like they think that people who have children have some type of amnesia that happens that makes them forget, and that's the reason why they go and do it again, because it's absolutely
Yeah.
painful, stressful. So there has to be, I think that that same kind of thing happens with grief. I
Mhm.
think that when you go through grief, you have this this forgetting of anything that has happened before, anything you are just, grief brings you to the present in a way that is tortuous. Everything becomes so important that wasn't before. Things that you wouldn't normally notice, like passing a tree, and you'll be like, wow, I remember when I was with my grandmother and we talked about that tree. Everything is present. I think that's one of the most painful parts, because we often use distractions to forget about the tough parts of life.
Yeah.
We go do things, we hang out. When you're in grief, you don't want to do any of that. You said, how can you keep the light when you're in grief? I don't know if that's possible.
Mhm.
I haven't found that. I think
Mhm.
one of the parts of surrendering to grief is allowing yourself to, allowing the light to disappear for a minute. The
Mhm.
pretending that we do in grief a lot of times, or the numbing that we do in grief, whether it's I'm going to throw myself into work, I'm going to throw my, whatever it is that we do to escape those feelings. I think that we do have to let the waves of grief, as Rachel Cargle calls it, come and like wash up on us. We have to allow ourselves to feel that pain, acknowledging that I am not the same. I will never be the same after this. Um, Hopefully, having people around you who do not rush you through grief. I think that the shame of grief and what you do to the people around you, or what might be happening to the people around you because of your grief, can also be heavy. So I always say this: if I had to go back, and I mean, I will probably experience a heart wrenching grief like that again, because that's something that's guaranteed to all of us. Is I as long as you allow loving and you live, um, I would have joined a grief support group, because when you're around people who are in grief, you don't have to pretend. You don't
Yeah.
have to show up in any other way. And I think had I had that, I could have released the burden that I was putting on a lot of people in my life who could not understand
Mhm.
what I was going through because they hadn't had that experience yet. Um, Causing fights and arguments and things about how people
Mhm.
were not showing up, that could have just been alleviated if I had found my community someplace else. I think it's another lesson in how we try to make people show up the way we need them to, when sometimes people love you and just cannot. And that's a really powerful part of grief that I've experienced too.
That's so true, because I feel like a lot of times people don't know what to do with grief, especially if it's a loved one that was really close, or if it was a child, or if it was a
Hmm.
significant other, somebody that was there daily with you. Not saying to minimize anybody else who passed away in your life, but somebody in your household, and you're trying to figure things out. Like, what does a Tuesday look like? You know what I mean? Um,
Hmm.
and you kind of like go outward again. You don't look inside. You kind of do step out, and a lot of people around you catch strays because they don't know how to deal with this. It's almost like a professional level of help that you need, and
Yeah.
you're looking to your cousin, and they're like, I don't know. Like, they don't know what to say. That's why it's always hard when somebody passes away. You be like, I don't know the right word. You're like trying to pick from, like a cherry tree of words, and like, I hope this sounds good. I hope that sounds okay. But you said grief is a journey, and it's not always death. I think that's what I just wanted, like,
Hmm.
I was like, thank God somebody said it. And people don't acknowledge that enough. We can grieve a divorce, a job, and then friendships, and then move into a new city because you missed the old one. And I think we ignore the pain because it's not death. So how can we
Hmm.
create space to grieve things that people have told us are unworthy of grieving? Because in grief, there is a lesson to be learned. Like you said, there's always a lesson. But if we don't even acknowledge that we're grieving, it's like we'll miss the lesson.
Oh, yes, and I talk about this in the book. I grieved New York for about 15 years, you know, and I mean, moving from New York to a different
Yeah,
city.
you said 15
Um,
years. Like, girl.
I mean, what I mean by that is I refuse to accept, and I don't know
Hmm.
that you necessarily have to accept grief at I don't know that acceptance is a necessary step in grief for everyone. But
Mhm.
what I mean by that is I refuse to accept that this is where I am now.
Mm.
What I did was I put so much of my life. My work was in New York, so I was always home. My family's in New York, so I was always
Mhm.
there. I called New York is home. I always was moving as if I'm just waiting until I move back. When
Mm.
you're in that kind of a mode, that means that where you are is you're not grounded in where you are. And when you're not
Yeah.
grounded in where you are, you can't build community. You don't feel all of the things that you feel when you consider a place that you are home. And so yeah, I think I was in grief with that for like for like I don't know, 15 years is dramatic, but like 10 years of like, I cannot believe I'm not moving back right now. I cannot believe I'm still living here. I also was in a false story of I can only find joy and community and peace in New York. People other out in other places don't get me like people in New York get me. And so that was creating issues in terms of like finding community, finding friends. How can you meet new people when you think that your people cannot possibly exist where you
Yeah.
are? So all of that became a barrier to what I was really desiring in my life. When I made that piece of acceptance that this is my home, where I am is where I am, all of a sudden all the things that I wanted just came rushing in. And so I'm just mentioning that because it sounds like, oh my gosh, like why can't you just move on? When we are stubborn, when we are determined, when we are unwilling to accept, it's hard. You won't move on. You can stay. I'm sure, people listening have met people who have had a relationship in 20, 30 years ago. They are still there. Like
Still
the
stuck.
relationship, yes. So we can be stuck in grief too with things that have nothing to do with death for years and years, and our lives will pass us by. And it's it's something that I invite us to look at, because you wouldn't think that we could be holding on to something and blocking our blessings in that kind of a way, but we do sometimes unintentionally.
Yeah. So you talk about trust a lot. I feel like most of the book is around being like finding ways to trust yourself or beginning to trust yourself and being honest. Um and looking into yourself to get the answers that you really need to move to have the life that you want. So what steps do you think we can take, like the smallest steps to begin to trust ourselves? Because I think it's hard, especially when you've been in the same situation and maybe you failed, because you try to use history as an indicator of what the future is going to be, right? History repeats itself, da da da. So like you'll hesitate, like when you got to jump in rope, like double dutch. It's like if you're not sure about jumping, and they always be, it's always that one girl, you be like, lay bird, lay, like, girl, just jump in, because you don't want to get hit by the rope. Like if you ever got hit by the
Right,
rope in your face, me, you get like this. It's like I know I can jump once I get in and I'll be good, but I'm so afraid to just go for it, because I remember that pain and I had that whoop on my face. And so it's like I don't trust that it'll be okay. And even if it's
right.
not okay, I can still move. You know what I mean? So how do you think we can begin to, like, even if we don't know the next step, because it is faith and stuff, and just having hope, but how can we just begin to move and not just be sitting in like that whole ready, 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 set, and never go, because we don't trust us.
Yeah. I like to not play a game, but like play a game with myself. And like, have you ever been like about to do something, make a decision, or talk to somebody, and then something will tell you? That's what we call it, like something told me. Something told me. What is
Yeah.
the something?
Mhm.
It's me. It's us. It's our intuition.
Mhm.
It's our trust.
Mhm.
It's our internal compass. Whatever word you want to use, it's our higher self. Whatever you use for it. But
Mhm.
anytime that I go against that something told me part of myself, I am usually like, why didn't I listen? And so, even in the small ways, when something tells me to park right here, when something tells me to make a right, when something told me not to leave yet,
Yeah.
something told me to check and make sure she's actually leaving the house when she said, even in the small ways, I practice following that part of myself that is giving me information that I don't understand or have any truth or fact or reason to believe what it's telling me, but I go with it. And I think that that's a muscle we have to exercise. I don't, unfortunately, know any easeful way to trust yourself other than to practice trusting yourself. It is through evidence that we have done it and that we will be okay, that we begin to learn that even if I trust myself and it doesn't work out, I will
Mhm.
still be able to make it. And so, when we do it in the small ways, it feels less. um, it feels less scary. You know, I'm gonna
Yeah.
make it right here today. I'm gonna park
Mhm.
here today.
Mhm.
Then when we continue to move and do bigger things, I'm in this relationship. I'm a
Ye
swipe left, whatever it is. Like when we
Mhm.
begin to make those decisions, then we start to realize, okay, I do know what I'm talking about. And I just want to mention really quickly that we lose our self-trust because we grow up in a society that tells us that we shouldn't listen to ourselves. We should do what we're told. We should follow somebody else's plan. We should listen, all of these different ways in which we are told not to trust ourselves, especially women, especially Black women. And so don't feel bad if you don't trust yourself. Most of us have been taught not to trust ourselves. We are learning, relearning what we already had, that most of us have had stripped from us without our permission, not necessarily maliciously, just as a way to get us to conform,
Yeah.
and to fit in and to belong. And so it's a journey back to that self trust, and it's one that I think I'm still on myself, and I think most people that I know my age and beyond are still on.
Yeah, and you're right about the small steps, because baby, when I don't wanna go somewhere and you be like, "I shoulda just stayed home." So I do think
Mhm.
it is the small steps, and then we get to those bigger moments because, you can stay in stuck mode for a long time and not even realize it. Um,
Mhm.
so you shared a story about a family member you lived with, as a child who had a drinking problem, and as a kid, you were afraid that, he would fall asleep with a cigarette on him and, like, basically set the whole house on fire. Uh,
Mhm.
there are certain things in our lives that we can control and others that we can't. Like, you couldn't control your living situation. You couldn't control his drinking problem, but it was still a problem in your life. Like, it became your problem by just being there. So how do we acknowledge that even though we didn't create the problem that directly impacts us, because technically it's not our fault, but we can and try to find ways to leave room for forgiveness so that we don't become stuck forever. So even if you're not in that same space no more, we pick up the habits that we have, like when we were in that space, or we move, or we get triggered by certain things. So how do we kind of figure out, like, oh, it wasn't my fault, got it, but then also like how to let this go so it doesn't burden me forever or impact other relationships that I have.
Yeah, similar to the story I just shared about grieving New York for 10 years. What I talk about in the book is how one thing is sometimes related to another thing. How I'm now working through, you say you're working through accepting that you're not going to live in New York. And then it reminds me, why was I so angry about that? Why was it so hard for me to let go of that? Well, actually, it was because I only left New York because of a living situation that I cannot control. Had I not had that situation, I probably wouldn't have left. So the grief that
Yeah.
I'm experiencing around New York is not necessarily about, oh, I wish I was in New York. It was, I felt like I had no choice but to leave. And so I'm saying that because a lot of times we are hard on ourselves about things that we're experiencing that seem small, that actually aren't small when we think about what they're connected to or why we feel the way we feel.
Yeah.
When it comes to your question in terms of things that are happening in our lives that we can't control, I was angry for a long time. Um, it wasn't until I started therapy, it wasn't until I started the work that I teach that I realized my anger was blocking me. That was very upsetting.
Yeah.
Like, not
Yeah.
only could I not control the situation that was happening in my home, but now I have to do the work to undo it because you did it. It was like a double whammy for me.
Yeah, and I think
Um,
that's what messes people up. It's like, I didn't even create this problem. Like,
yes. So now here I am cleaning up your work again.
Mhm.
Um, Through forgiving myself or giving myself grace and extending grace to myself for the things that I've done, because I'm not perfect. I haven't necessarily lived a life like that family member in the book I mentioned lived, but there are things in my life that I look at myself and say, "Wow, I can't believe that I did that, and I'm sorry for that." And I had to work to forgive myself for the things that I have done. It was through that I realized, so if I look at this family member's life and I look at the choices that they made, how can I look at them like from a distance, right? Because when you're up close, it's too hard. But from a distance, if I was looking at them, how could I begin to have some sense of forgiveness? And it was through realizing how much of their own lives that they've lost that I was able to find some sense of empathy.
Mm.
And I also just want to preface this, and I say this a couple times in the book: forgiveness is not for everybody. We
Yeah, I like
we we, we don't have to choose forgiveness.
yeah. That was
Um,
something that was like, I don't think anybody has ever really stated that part. I think that everybody wants us to get to the forgiveness mode, and I'm just like, well, if something just happened technically, like, you know what I mean? Like, what if you just
yeah.
like, let's just rerun it. Like, if you said you left New York, like something happened to you 6 months ago and now you're in New York. I mean, now you're out of New York.
Hmm.
It just happened 6 months ago. Why are
Yeah.
y'all rushing me to forgive? Like, first of all, I'm trying to figure out how is that whatever happened in my past showing up in my present so I can like fix the future, but now it's just like also y'all always want me to forgive somebody so quick. And it's like, what can I just feel what I want to feel right now? Is okay to just say not right now. And I think when you said that, I was like, I know that's going to help a lot of people because I think we start feeling bad about not being able to just forgive. Like, are we not, you know, being empathetic enough? Are we not being human enough? Are we not being whatever the religion? I'm Christian, so am I not being a good Christian because I can't get to that part quick enough? So I appreciate that.
Hmm. And I think, forgiveness is a journey too. People
Hmm.
want to rush you through grief. People want to rush you through forgiveness. People want to rush you to trust yourselves because they are uncomfortable with the fact that you are uncomfortable and that you are leaning on them for things that they haven't worked through themselves. And if you would just move on, then we could move on and we don't have to be
Hmm.
uncomfortable together and we could pretend that everything is fine. And that's not what life is, right? It's messy. It's a lot. And yeah, I have learned that when it comes to any of these hard things that we're experiencing, whether it be learning to trust yourself, learning to love yourself, learning to forgive yourself, learning to forgive others, learning for grace, all of it is an option. None of it is anything that we have to decide. For me, I was not going to be able to move forward and allow love in. Love was blocked. I would not allow people in at all.
Hmm.
I still to this day don't have the words for how that forgiveness just opened me up
Hmm.
to allowing people in. It was like the wall was gone. And I just feel that get curious about what the forgiveness is for. I am not forgiving that family member for them. I'm not forgiving them for anyone else in my family. They don't even know that I have forgiven them or why or what or any of the it was just for me, for my family, for my kids, for my lineage, for the people come like I'm doing it so that I can be free and so that I can be free for my daughters and my friends and like the people that I want to show up for. And I'm a different person because of it. And I think if you're going to approach forgiveness, that's a really healthy way to approach it because when we start thinking about we need to let them go and we need to forgive them for no, that's not the type of forgiveness that I necessarily showed up with. It was
Hmm.
more so a these are the circumstances that we both were dealt with. And how can I learn to see the humanness in the situation for both of us so
Hmm.
that I can let go of the story that I'm carrying that is not serving me.
Yeah, that's good. I like that because that really like hit home.
Mhm.
My favorite chapter, I think, in the whole book is intention. Like that book, because I'm like that part was so good. I was like, "Oh my goodness, that's me right there." Because when setting intentions, it can be hard because, as you said, we might be afraid to speak about it out loud, fear that it's not going to come true, or that we will publicly fail. I think now with our generation, I'm a millennial. I think with our generation and with Gen Z, we're afraid to fail publicly. So it's like we won't even try it or we will minimize it. And I know for me, like I always get excited about a new idea or something I want to move on, but then I instantly burst my own bubble. I'll be like, oh, it's not going to be, or I try to minimize it because if I feel like if I get too excited and it doesn't work, I don't want to disappoint myself.
Mhm.
You have a different approach, and I like yours better. You was just like you get to feel excited about the thing, and you said, "I'm not wrong about me because my dreams aren't here yet," and I
Mhm.
was like, that is a word. And because I think a lot of times when we have an intention about anything, we forget that the follow through is not gonna look like how we daydreamed about it. And so, when you just even said that, we're still who we say we are, even if it's
Mhm.
not, mm, even if it's not perfect, or even if the dream is not showing up, or coming to fruition now. So how did you get there? Because that is a road that I wish had like early 20s, late 20s. I wish I would have got there quicker. So how did you get there saying that, oh, you can have joy in this too, like you can be cool.
Yes. Okay, so you're a New Yorker too, so like, we have this
I'm straight from
mentality.
Brooklyn.
Right. So, we have this mentality of, or at least I did. When I was growing up, I grew up in Fort Greene, and so there was this idea of, I really, really bought into the New York idea that, like, if you really make it here, if you really can survive here, if you really can make it here, you really can make it anywhere. To the point
Mhm.
where it was this naive, um, affirmation that I carried with me when I went into the military, when I started my first business. It was like, yo, I'm a New Yorker. I could do anything. Anything is possible. Like, I can make this happen. And I think that blind faith, that blind, I didn't realize that affirmation had become my own personal affirmation. It wasn't even about New York anymore. It was like, I can do this. I can do anything.
Mhm.
I would repeat that to myself. That was what I carried with me in my 20s. Truth be told, by about 26, life had slapped me upside my head so bad that wasn't working no more. Like, I was like, oh, actually, adulting is wild.
Yes.
And don't know if I can make it anywhere. I'm ready to, like, you know, lot, I'm ready to start over. Um, then I had started having to rely on, I know community is important, the people around me, yes, but I would do this thing called fact checking. I talked about it in my first book, The Sugar Jar, where anytime I would have something come up in my mind, and I don't know about your intrusive thoughts, but my intrusive thoughts are loud. They are annoying. They are unwelcome. They, like, rooster style, wake me up in the middle
Mine
of the
is
night.
definitely on the main stage at the Summer Jam screen. Like it's I
Listen,
can't even sleep. It's like, girl, like let me just at least get some rest, okay, before you can act up again. Let me just get a few hours, right?
and
It won't
mine's let me get rest, but then as soon as I open my eyes, like, hey,
Mhm,
remember when I told you ain't about nothing? You still ain't about
mhm.
nothing. So it took me a while, but I'm like, okay, so this story, this I'm not about anything, this I'm not gonna make it, this is I'm a joke, is coming up. What is this actually coming from? And I fact check it.
Mhm,
Is there any truth that I'm not about anything? Is there any
mhm.
truth that I'm a failure? Is there any truth to this? No. So then where is this coming from? Who said? Who said that this is true? Well, I said it. Why did you say it? And then I just begin to ask myself questions. Well, it was because when I saw this person post on Instagram and they, had all of this going on, I don't have anything going on. Oh, okay, so this is comparison. So this isn't even true. This isn't even based on facts. So you're comparing yourselves to them. So how do we know what they had to do to get to where they are? What's their
Yeah,
story? Do you want everything that they had to have in order to get to where they are? Like, do you want their good times and their bad? Because you need both. And so I use that to check myself and get myself back to a place of, okay, so I don't want their good or bad. I don't know what they got going on. I'm actually quite happy with where I was before I saw what was happening on the gram. Maybe it's time for me to close up my app or whatever it was that made me get into comparison. I was fine before that. Maybe it's time for me to get back to myself. Maybe it's time for me to get back to my peace. Maybe it's time for me to get back to what makes me feel supported, loved. Maybe it's time
mhm.
for me to create, or maybe it's time for me to rest. I start trying those things on. And I will say, I'm a millennial too, but the older I get, the more that I do those attacks, those intrusive thoughts, they get they're not just, oh, you're not about anything anymore. They get really like they get more knifey. Like um they are mean.
Yeah,
And I still have to battle with them. I feel like it is a battle with those moments when they come up. I'm just stronger than them now because I
yeah,
have more practice than them now. And I think that, um like grief, what we talked about earlier, I think it's a practice that we learn to, okay, so it's time for me to just get in battle with this because what we're not going to do is do this for the whole week. So let me deal with this right now, and see what's going on. And usually it's just a bunch of mistruths that we're carrying, and beating ourselves up for things that aren't real, but it feels very, very, very real.
Yeah. And it is so funny because I wanted to read this passage that you wrote, and I felt like you blew the gate wide open with this one because it goes into like the story that we tell ourselves. So you says on page 83, our job isn't to eliminate nerves, becoming robotic versions of ourselves that don't feel. Our job is to lean on tools that can support us through these emotions so we can feel safe enough to take the risk. I used a tool that was new to me, patience, and set the intention that I would be a kind companion to myself on this voyage. The intention would set the tone for any future walks. I was learning the gift of being on my side. My job was to nurture myself and show up willing to support whatever came up during that experience. And then you said this is your job too. When I tell you, I was like, oh my God, I will do a thing. I will have an intention to like set out to do the course. I'll do the whole thing, but I'm not my best companion. And I was just
Hmm.
thinking, like, oh my goodness, you start thinking about, I thought about all the time. I was like, well, you know what? This is why this didn't work because you weren't quick enough, or maybe you weren't talented enough. And then, like throughout the journey, yes, it would get done. And even if I achieved the goal, it would just be like, because the whole time I wasn't like rooting for myself, in that way. Even if I
Hmm.
wanted to win, telling myself like I wasn't being the best coach for myself. And so how can we be more kind to ourselves? Because I feel like that is if we could just get over that hump, it will save us like half the journeys. It would make it more enjoyable. Because, like I said, even when I got the win, it just felt like I was tired. I didn't even
Mm.
feel, like when you run the race, you be like, I got it. I was just like, all right, thank you. All right, bye. And it wasn't even because maybe it was that hard, but it was like, it was mentally exhausting.
I think it is like that in the beginning. I think you
Mhm.
are going to be tired because it's like, oh my gosh, I had to, because you was in battle, because you're
Mhm.
having to, push out all of these other thoughts and really focus. I think over time it gets to a place. I'm just celebrating the fact that I wrote 2 books now. Like I did not celebrate the fact that the sugar jar. It was just like I
Mhm.
just kept going. I was so afraid of,
Mhm.
how well I was going to do, wanting to do the best that I could, that I was never going to get another book deal again, all of these things. Like, I never celebrated that or really lived in the fact that I wrote a book until I wrote Wisdom of the Path. And I had to make a decision that I'm not going to do this book the same way I did that book. After the book came out that week, I went on a vacation. I celebrated myself. I enjoyed myself. I logged off. I think it's important that we give ourselves like the grace of like, when does it get easier? It gets
Mhm.
easier when it becomes more of a regular part of our routine. And even in those moments, it still may not be easy. That was not easy for me to be off. It's still something that I'm learning to be in a zone of rest. I also want to say that I watch a lot of professional sports, and one of the things that athletes aren't afraid to admit is that they want to win. Another thing that athletes aren't afraid to admit is that they think they're the best, even if they are not the best. And
Mhm.
I don't know if they are lying to themselves or maybe they actually believe it. But when you say that every day, I'm the
Yeah.
best. I'm going to win. I'm here to win, whatever it is that you're here to do. Cause I think there's a lot of talk sometimes of like, there is no competition. There's enough space. That's true. There is enough space for us. We should be making room at the table. We should be bringing people with us. And also, Myleik Teele says this. She says, "You will not outwork me."
Yeah.
And there has to be a level of I am about this, and I think that's the
Mhm.
grit that I bring with me. I try to bring with me to whatever I'm doing, not against other people, but within myself.
Yes.
Like I'm gonna go for this. And I think that that's something that's really important too.
Yeah, I love that. And you spoke of like celebrating yourself, and joy was something that I loved also, that you said saying yes to joy. But doing something for yourself sometimes can make you feel selfish, or other people might even interpret it as you being selfish. How can we get out the habit of that, believing that if we do something nice for ourselves, then it has to be kind of like a reason almost? Because like I
Hmm.
know for me, if I complete a task or if I do a project, then it's like now I can have the thing, whatever the thing is, or now I can give myself permission to play outside, almost like. But it's like sometimes you just need to play. You don't have to be about the work day. I need to be stimulated in a way that's not attached to a work goal or something like that. So, and especially in our culture, like we're taught, okay, you do your work first and then you play. Or even like if we have more than one sibling or whatever, we don't attach just doing things for ourselves. It's always about pushing out, helping the community, helping everyone else. But it's not like, okay, let's go on a trip to London by myself, for myself, to celebrate myself. What you did, I was like, oh, she's on her eat, pray, love, and I'm rooting for her to win.
I
And you
love
did
it.
it, but how many people do it, even if they have the money, or even if they can just go to the spa or get the massage? It's not always about leaving the country, but just saying
Mhm.
that I did this for me because I like it and that's it. How do we change that? Like the idea that we don't deserve it, basically.
Yeah, that's been the hardest work for me.
Really?
I never saw any of the women in my family in my life getting to enjoy, like, it was always something to do
Yeah.
or it was just always. Maybe Jeopardy, like, maybe they always got to watch their Jeopardy,
Yeah.
Wheel of Fortune or whatever. But I feel like we just have to start to make time for play and relaxation. And I had to start scheduling in prioritizing myself in the same way that I would prioritize work. It started really small with something I teach called the joy list, where I would take 5 minutes of my day and I would schedule in something that I love that is easily accessible, like going for a walk, FaceTiming a friend, painting with my watercolor pens that don't even need any, they have the water in it. It's just a quick setup, like something that I would do. And then I was like, I feel better when I have something like this to look forward to. Like when I wake up in the morning, even if I have a day filled with work and paying bills, I feel good when I know I have something for myself coming up. So then I realized my joy was attached to me having something for myself coming up. It can't always be a trip. So then how am I going to be doing this on a daily basis? So it's doing it in the small ways too. Yes, the spa. Yes, maybe a trip. Yes, maybe dinner with friends. But also, what do you do on a daily basis to connect to yourself, to have fun? And it can't just be TV. I haven't met anyone who watches TV daily who still feels like I had joy today. Nobody. It's great, but it's not something that helps us feel, that I found in working with people one on one or in workshops and stuff, that helps us feel like I checked the block. Not that we need a checklist, but like within myself, I feel like today was a good day. No, it's usually like there's still something missing. And so I would really invite people to get curious about, if you don't have 5 minutes for yourself every day, then it's time to relook at your life. It's time to
Yeah.
relook at your schedule. It's time to relook at what you're prioritizing. And I'm not saying like we all have work, we all have bills, we all have like kids, family, things that we have to do. But if you don't have 5 minutes to do something that you deserve, that you feel like you deserve, that you love, um, then it's probably going to something else. And what I mean by that is maybe you're taking care of other people and not taking care of yourself. Maybe
Mhm.
you're over giving, over sharing, overworking, over to the point where you don't have any of that time for you. And it might be time to reprioritize, because it doesn't, the deserving part, like I deserve this, comes when we do it. And then we realize, oh, this isn't anything that is innately that I have had to have ever earned. This is something that helps me be human, feel. It's an innate part of living. um and I think it comes from creating and carving out that space for ourselves, which is
I
why
like,
people do the artist way. I don't know if you
yeah.
ever heard of that
I
book,
got the Trust
but
me, I
that's why
got the book,
people
the
do it,
workbook.
because they
I'm
need
always
something to
trying to
like
figure it out.
keep them on track with
Mhm.
showing up for themselves. And if you if you again, 5 minutes, I want you to start with 5 minutes of carving out time for you. And if you find that that's hard, then that's your starting point. Why is 5 minutes hard? What am I telling
Yeah.
myself that I need to do to earn 5 minutes?
That's good because I do have the artist way. I just haven't started yet. I always look at it and I'm just like, huh. I read it and I'm like, this is about to be one of those journeys. But one thing I wanted to ask you about was joy in work and how do we untie the knot that equates? what we do or how we perform at work without joy. Because I know for me, my joy does come from doing the work that I do. If I get a gig, if I get a freelancing, if I'm writing, if I'm creating. But then the problem comes in if I don't get it. If it doesn't pan out the way I want to, my joy is now on a yo-yo. So it's tied to the outcome of something that might not have even been in my control. Maybe the budget wasn't there. Maybe it was just somebody who decided that was new there that said, I'm gonna go with my friend and not with you. So how do we untie the how do we keep a balance? Because like I know I still want to love my work and have joy for it from it, but I also don't want it to dictate my joy, and that's hard.
Yeah, it's super hard. So there's this documentary I watched called Blue Zones, and it talks about people who live to be 100 and what they do to create, that atmosphere for themselves. And they have this thing in Japan called ikigai, which is basically like something that you do that you feel purpose in. And for some people, it's creating instruments. For some people, it's gardening. For some people, it's being a part of their community. And I realized how it was never attached to work. It was never attached to the work that they do. Like most of the people have some sense of work, but that was the thing that they did or that they showed up in that had nothing to do with their work. And so I decided to look at, I mean, I love what I do and I get joy from it, but it cannot be my joy. My kids can't be my joy. My man can't be my joy. My friends can't be my joy because the expectations aren't like if I put it in them and people are going to disappoint you. Work is going to disappoint you.
Yeah.
Then I don't have a way to get back to me. And so I find ways of creating joy that have nothing to do with work by I had to really like, and you may agree with this, but when you do what you love, it kind of gets messy in that, but this is where I find so much joy. And I
Yeah.
have to remind myself, this is still work. When I leave this podcast interview, I am not Yasmine Cheyenne. I am just Yas. I get to do what brings me joy and what fills me up. And that is my priority in terms of how I can in a way. So I think that we have to flip it and we have to separate ourselves from our work if we want to have peace and joy in our lives on a regular basis, um, and rest.
Yeah.
Because if my work is where my joy is, then when will I stop working?
That's true. That's very, and I also think that when you said when I get off this, I'm just yes. I think friendship that helps to
Mm-hmm.
bring us back down to reality. But also, it could be they could be the gift and the curse because we talked. You talked about friendship and community. Um, so when the going, you good. When the going is not good with friendship, because you talked about the root friends and like the leaf friends and the branch friends, because you got it from like Tyler Perry, and I heard
Mm-hmm.
this whole thing on that, and I thought it was really excellent the way he broke it down. But like you said, sometimes you gotta take inventory of everything, the good, the bad, and just start weighing your options about what type of friends that you have, so that when you need to have that outside source of energy and strength, or just to have the fun, you have real people around you. And so my biggest question was when I was reading that chapter about community, do you think we keep friends around because we are so used to be treated poorly, either by them or just like in general? Um, and because we just don't want to be alone, because every time I look at the news now or social media, always talking about the rise of loneliness. And some people
Mm-hmm.
are they'd rather be, even in like in a relationship, it's like they'd rather have a warm body than nobody. So no matter how bad they are being treated, it's like they can show up and appear to be like, well, I'm still coupled. So you think that we do that in friendship, and that's why we take so long to leave out of the friendships that don't serve us anymore?
Unfortunately, yes. And this is going to sound really cliche, but I think a lot of us don't understand our worth because we've never had it modeled, or we think, yeah, that might be good for them. Maybe they know their worth, but that's not how it goes in my family, or that's not how it works in my community, or that's not how it works in my culture. Um, I also think with friends, I think that people accept people or romantic relationships. That's just how they are. They really do care about me. They really do love me, but that's just how they are. So they excuse the behavior as a part of their personality rather than they are just trash. And they're treating you like trash because you allow them to. That's like sometimes the hard thing that we have to be, honest with ourselves. sometimes we have to be blunt with ourselves and be real about the people that we're allowing to pour into us. This is so powerful, I think, because so many of us have draining lives simply because of the people we have in our lives.
Yes.
If we eliminated the people who are draining us, we would not have the drama.
Mhm.
And you have to ask yourself, you say you don't want any drama in your life. Is that true? Is
Mhm.
that true? Because if
Mhm.
you really don't want any drama in your life, then you're going to have to make changes in the people that you have in your life. And it may not seem like that's possible, but it really is. Like I talked about this in a post recently, but like a lot of people think, oh, my life is so boring. You know, I've been healing and I lost so many people. I'm like, you're not bored. You know, you are free. You are free to do you. You are free to create. You are free to live. You are free to hang out with the people who are not stirring up all kinds of drama in your life 24/7. If that's not what we're healing for, then I don't know. You know, so yes, I think people are saying yes to people who they know aren't for them because they're lonely, but I also think that people aren't really aware of the fact that they have another choice, and you do.
Yeah, I like that, saying that you have another choice, and I think we often are afraid to, like, go down that route or even give ourselves permission to, like, think about the possibility of something different, and I this
Mhm.
done, my wrapping up questions was like you gave yourself the ability to be bad at something and then get good, like meditation, or even saying like you weren't a morning person, and that was me. I always said I wanted to. I still to this day, I consider myself a night owl. Like I can stay up till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning easily, but to wake up at like 4 or 5, it's a struggle. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, but I like you said, you knew that you wanted something different and you wanted it badly, right? And you knew that you would maximize your time, right? You would have time for yourself, then you could start your day just by waking up earlier. So a lot of times we know that we'll get a better result, you know what I'm saying? But we still just don't do the better thing because I know for me, I tried the 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning situation, and it worked. That's the crazy part. It actually worked. I was just like, these people are waking up early for no reason. It's just dumb. My thing is, whatever you could do at 5 o'clock in the morning, I promise you, you will achieve the same results at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or 11 o'clock or 12. It is not that big of a deal. The big deal was that I felt like I wasn't rushed. I am the person that I will
Mm.
get there on time, but I promise you, it was if we did like if a camera crew followed me around, it would be like it's like I'm trying to move and I'm like, and you make it, then you're like, all right, y'all, I'm here. But it's like I'm still then I have to just go into my day. I'm already on 1,000. Whereas when I woke up earlier and I'm like, oh, it almost felt like I ain't have nothing to do. I'm like, wait, hold up. This is how y'all feel when y'all just be up extra early and y'all just come here like this is how y'all feel like there's no pressure, huh? Nobody, you ain't even sweat. I'm not even sweating. I had breakfast. You want something? Like I knew I had more time now. And so
Yeah.
it's like, why is it so hard for us? And I knew that would happen. Like it was kind of logical. Give yourself more time, you'll have more time to do things. We'll know something is good for us, but we just won't even like give ourselves the opportunity. We'll talk ourselves out of it. We'll be like, I'm just not a morning person. So that's why. That's the thing.
Yeah. I think that's another lie that we tell ourselves. Like, that's just
Mhm,
not a morning person. Who says? And then we
mhm.
have to like fact check and ask ourselves, like, where do I have the evidence that I have never been a morning person, that I'm not? Or maybe it's just, it's hard for me to wake up in the morning. Okay, so that's not so fixed. So what can I do to help it be easier for me to wake up in the morning? I think for me, it was definitely the lie. Like, I'm not a morning person. And when I say lie, I don't mean it in an abrasive way. I mean it's a story. Like
Yeah,
it's a fictional thing that we're telling ourselves that it's actually not true, but we believe it, and so it becomes true. When
yeah.
I did that period of waking up at 5 a.m., it really changed my life because, like you, I wasn't rushing.
Mhm,
By 9 a.m., I had my whole day. I was like,
mhm.
wow. At night, I was actually tired. I got
Mhm,
better sleep. So those were all positives. It was checking so many blocks of things that I actually needed to feel better. Do I wake up at 5 a.m. every day? Absolutely not. Like, that is not realistic for me. But when I know that I need to get up and I want to have an easeful day, I know now that I can do it, which
yeah,
before wasn't even an option for me. So it just gave me more access to ways to take care of myself. And I think that's the goal. It's not necessarily that we need to wake up at 5 or 3 or 6 every day. It's when I need to do this for myself, do I believe I can? And
Yeah.
that discipline helped me build discipline and commitment for other things down the line where I knew if I could do that, then I can do this. And it just, again, it builds that trust and that belief in ourselves.
Yeah, I love that. Well, to wrap, I think this book for me personally, and I would encourage other sister girls out there to read the book because it invites you to reconsider some things that you
Hmm.
believe to be true about yourself, then check things off, or just sit down and look at some things. So, what do you want readers to get get the most? If you had to say, I really want them to get this, what would you say that is?
I mean, I really want people to find comfortability and curiosity. I think that throughout the book, I'm talking about ways that I am becoming curious to understand myself, to understand my family, to understand why I do the things that I do, and how I can find truth in that curiosity so that I can change what isn't working for me. So if you read this book and you begin to become curious in your own life, that is, then I feel like I did my job, because through curiosity, you are going to create so much positive change. Um, and I'm excited for that, for the people who read it.
I love that. Now, flash questions. You got to answer these questions really, really quickly.
Okay.
Writing in the day or night,
Night.
working from home or going into the office,
Home.
writing a book or meditating,
Writing a book.
coffee or tea,
Tea.
Jay-Z or Nas,
Jay-Z.
paperback or hardcover,
Ooh, hardcover.
girlfriends or insecure,
Girlfriends.
Malcolm X or Martin Luther King Jr.,
Malcolm X.
is it Uchi Wally or is it one mic?
Uchiwali.
You the first. All right. And who is Yasmine Cheyenne?
Oh man, who is she? A creative who is just really excited to be doing life the way I am right now. So
I love that. I have to say, you are the first person who have chosen Uchiwali. Everybody want to be so smart and say, "Well, it's always one mic," and I'm like, "Did y'all hear?"
no,
I'm like, "Did y'all ever hear Uchi?" Like, whatever.
they
But
wasn't there. They wasn't
they
there.
wasn't there because I'm like, I get it. I get the whole one mic thing, but Uchiwa, like, y'all need to play that, okay? Thank you so much. Please tell people where they can find you and on social media, your website, do all the plugs, all the things.
You can find me on Instagram at Yasmine Cheyenne. And if you go to yasminecheyenne.com, you can find my books anywhere books are sold.
Thank you so much, Yasmine. This was great. I
Thank
love this conversation.
you.
To read the book because they're gonna get so much out of it. And I appreciate you for taking the time out.
Yes, thank you too.